Hello and welcome to Simblified. Today we have a short panel and a short episode in reaction to shocking news of big upheavals happening in the big tech leadership world. Isn't that so, Srikeit?
Yes,
Feels like a newscast.
yeah, I know.
Zuck.
I think we are more in the Sir part of the Zuck phase. But anyway, we are currently following and tracking some really big breaking news in the tech space, and that news is Chuck.
Sheryl Sandberg has quit Meta, or as it formerly was known, Facebook. So we thought we'd just do a little simplified episode on Sandberg. Both of us have been reading the usual tributes and everything that have been pouring in. And I thought it would be an interesting short episode to do where, I don't even want to say pay tribute to, but more like put her career and legacy somewhat in context.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what this episode is going to be. Again, it's a short one because Naren's in the US. He couldn't join us for this one. And Tony, unfortunately, is out with the bug. So everyone, please go wish him a happy, speedy, quick recovery. So let's get on with it. Sheryl Sandberg used to be, or still is at the time of this recording, the chief operating officer of one of the largest companies in the world, a company that she helped turn into one of the largest companies in the world. It really must be said. Facebook would not be what it is today if it weren't for Sandberg at the helm. So at Facebook, what she really did was she found a way for the company to make money. Let me just state it that way, right?
Yeah.
If you were to simply sum up what did Sheryl Sandberg do and what a contribution to Facebook was, she figured out how to make the company money. The story goes that she, apparently when she met Zuckerberg for the first time, she was 36 or something and Zuckerberg was 23 when Sandberg was hired.
Yeah.
She said that here were a bunch of kids who just wanted to make a nice site. That's really about it. And many times the phrase that has been used to describe Sheryl Sandberg, especially with respect to Facebook founders, young male testosterone and Red Bull fueled owners, is that she was the adult in the room. And it definitely seems that way. When you see the history of Facebook, sure, maybe all the creative direction, I might even say genius, came from Zuckerberg and the product team.
But it was its initiation was a very frat boy kind of.
There is documented more than enough time. Sandberg was really the person who found out how to make money, right? She was the one who sat down Zuckerberg and said, hey, listen, we'll need to run advertising on this thing, otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. And then from there, what seemed to be genius in 2010, of course, now very nefarious 2016 onwards, how time changes things, is a way to convert user data into data points that could be monetized and sold to advertisers. Seemed very novel again, as early as 2010. Again, it's not so long back that we're talking about this. But I think Sandberg's achievement comes at two levels, right? One, she figured out what was to be done. And two, and I think this is more important and underrated, is that she figured out how to do it at scale. And this is something that she had done previously as well. When she was at Google, not too many people talk about this right now, but she was really the person who turned a good idea, which was AdWords, and converted into something that could happen at scale. She set up an entire process and system and the teams where any advertiser could come and not need to speak to a Google representative or a sales individual or something like that, and be able to service themselves, hence turning Google into the behemoth that it is today, at least from a financial point of view. So in some sense, you could say that this woman was instrumental in making both Google and Facebook, Alphabet and Meta, the tech giants that they are today, because once they had that money coming in from advertising, they could pretty much do a lot of things. And I think that will be the more positive legacy that Sheryl Sandberg leaves behind.
I mean, to use a different analogy, and I was recently watching the movie The Founder, which was more about that the McDonald's story, how it kind of came about. And it was effectively transforming, if you were to take a restaurant analogy, from a family restaurant to a fast food chain, right? Which is a self-serve fast food, rapid service, and massive scales and volumes and low profit margins, but high volumes kind of business.
Yeah. And this is point I want to talk about a little later. Actually, I kept it as one of the concluding points. So we will actually talk about it over there, which is the whole thing about getting, like, an idea is one thing, but getting it to scale and being a successful business is a completely different thing. So Sandberg has actually had quite a storied career, and when you look through her like profile, you can't help but, I mean, you will notice that she came from a lot of privilege and obviously wrote that way. But I mean, for what it's worth, she's done a great job of, I mean, you play the cards that are dealt to you, right? And she played them very, very well. She 2 degrees from Harvard. She started off with McKinsey. She worked for Larry Summers, who used to be the Secretary of the Treasury under Bill Clinton. Just imagine that's being so top of a class that she was handpicked by Larry Summers. So that the story goes that she was enamored by Google, and she just went to Eric Schmidt and said, I love Google. I'd love to work over there, or something to that effect. And this was long before, Google was the cultural phenomenon that is today. We are talking about really, really long back, like early 2000s, I guess.
Yeah.
And Eric Schmidt said, yeah, sure, just come along and you can be the business unit head. And the funny thing is, Google didn't even have a business unit for her to be a head of. She was just, go. Was pretty much what it was. And
just take it and go.
Take it and go. And what she did take was the concept of AdSense and AdWords, and then she converted that into big business. We're not going to get too deep into what those things are outside scope of this particular episode. And she grew her team from 4 people to 4,000. And obviously the advertiser revenue, etc., went up. Many, many percentages, many zeros were involved in the making of that. And she was courted by Zuckerberg to join Facebook over many, many weeks, and finally joined. And so here's the Sandberg legacy, right? If you read a lot of articles right now about Sheryl Sandberg after she left Meta, you see that a lot of them are titled like this. So the conflicted legacy of Sandberg, and how will we remember her and all. The thing is, till 2016, she was untouchable, right? She had... After the successful stint at Google, she turned Facebook into a similar money-making behemoth. But apart from this, also, I have the numbers also over here. In 2009, Facebook made a total of $777 million through advertising. Huge at that time.
Oof.
In 2019, $117 billion. So, that. And there were also a lot of stories of Sandberg in the media. There used to be this famous thing that Facebook would always have constructive disagreements between their top number 1 and number 2, which was Zuckerberg and Sandberg. They wouldn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but that was portrayed as, oh, look how open our culture is, where even our management are disagreeing and they're all getting along and all that. It used to be a thing in Silicon Valley where investors would ask founders to find their Sandberg. This used to be a thing in the Valley. Like, okay, you got a great idea, but now to turn it into a business, you need to find
your Sandberg.
You need to find your Sandberg. And apart from this, let's not forget that she wrote, I mean, don't know whether it's how history will treat it, but she wrote one of the most influential books of the last decade, which is called Lean In. And it, in a nutshell, really about women finding their voice and space in the workspace. A lot of practical advice. To say that it is I mean, there are a few books that you can look at in the past couple of decades that have the kind of cultural impact that Lean In has. Like, Lean In has its own meetups, for example, in various cities that have been started by fans, and recruiters have spoken about the Lean In effect as well. And of course, there are downsides as well. There are people who say that it's very hyped and there's nothing really new in there and it's just her marketing and all that. And in 2013 or 14, she lost her husband, who she was very, very close to. I forget his name, but he used to work. I think he was one of the CXOs at SurveyMonkey. And that was a huge blow. Now, when you look at all of that together, again, not taking away from that tragedy, but all of that put together, how she bounced back from it, went back to her role, the book was happening at that point of time. So it all just had, Sandberg had this insane aura around her, right? Where she was the adult in the room. She transformed this business. It's pretty much untouchable. Scott Galloway said that if she had quit in 2016, she would be one of the Democratic nominations for the next elections.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, she had everything going for her. Successful woman leader, everything. And then everything changed from 2016 onwards. And it's kind of like not her fault, but because it was the fault of the company that she was running. So a lot of the blame came to her. And if we start just listing out the number of problems that Facebook had since 2016 onwards, this is going to be a very, very long episode.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, to start US presidential elections, Cambridge Analytica, January 6th, Myanmar genocide, Sri Lanka genocide. I mean,
and all of this right after she lost her husband, Dave Goldberg, who was also CEO of SurveyMonkey, by the way.
So CEO, correct. CEO of
SurveyMonkey,
yeah.
So all of that after that,
all of that after that, and just to add some spice to this, the day it broke out that she was trying to suppress a story about ex-boyfriend or something that came out of the Daily Mail. So it's just suddenly the character suddenly changed from 2016 onwards, right? And the change, I mean, her personal brand took a huge blow, which was parallel, I guess you could say, to the fortunes of the company, right? Like on the way up, everything looks rosy. On the way down, a brand took. But you'll also notice that there were some shifts that happened inside the company itself. It's almost like from 2016 onwards, parts of her kingdom were kind of taken away from her, right? Like Sandberg was at her peak in 2016. And after that, a lot of the things, now we don't know whether this was voluntarily given up or whether Zuck wanted to put a little more control, but like small parts of her kingdom were taken away from her, given to other CXOs. Nick Clegg was brought in to look after whatever that corporate affairs and public relations or whatever, which used to be her. And I remember reading this somewhere in one of the recent reviews that was written about her, is that at the end of it, somebody with such a storied career and transfer and who had such a transformative effect, she was left with a remarkably unremarkable role, which was telling SMEs about Facebook and how it can help them, or some equivalent, something like that. Really, that's what Sandberg has been reduced to. So some people say that Sandberg leaving was just, frustration over parts of her fiefdom being taken away from her, and some say, okay, she had enough of having her brand tarnished because of a man-child running the entire corporation or whatever it is, but we never know. And the rift between Zuckerberg and Sandberg also just seemed to increase. Sorry, Srikeit.
And then you talk about the entire using company resources for the wedding kind of scandal that was also additionally broken about. And I was reading about just that part because, again, I'm not as familiar with Sheryl Sandberg's work. I mean, I've been only recently following her as much. But this particular aspect, and I was talking to a friend about this as well, and like, irrespective of the stuff that's going on with her life and all that stuff, the question that we were asking is, what motivates a person who, there is no way, she probably has enough finances to finance like the GDP of a small country, I guess.
Yeah, she's
so herself is like at that level, but what drives someone to use that particular thing? And we kind of like isolated. There were two reasons. One is when you're at that level and when you're functioning at that level, right? You have so much of your life, like everyday running of your life, delegated to so many different places. You are an organization unto yourself. Right?
Yeah.
So you genuinely don't have an eye on all the major, like what you would think, like, okay, planning your own wedding seems like a very personal thing for most lay people, right? It's like, what I will do. But here is something like she may not even have had any idea of what's going on with that entire process. So everything could have been out of her hands. But the second angle, which I found was the more interesting one, was if you were to take it at face value that she did willingly do it, right? It's not so much that, I can use the company resources. It's more about the aspect of, and it also draws back to that earlier Daily Mail incident, right? When you're working at that level, there is a certain level of professional arrogance, right? The professional arrogance that actually drives you to feel that, the lines between my personal life and my professional life blur so much that on a personal level, I'm expected to behave this way. On a professional level, I am this demigod, right? And so that entire aura, and if you have to accomplish something, if I just step into my professional aura, this thing will be done in a cinch. Versus in my personal life, I'll have to put a lot of struggle into it. It's the same angle between like the guy who may be a CEO of a company doesn't get a buy come to their home that day, has to wash the dishes in his sink as well. Right. So the point is, but you are a demigod at one level, and so that disjunct sometimes causes you to like use your power in ways which actually can become problematic later. And all of these aspects that you highlighted before, all of that playing on her mind with the company going the way it has, and her steady decline from where she was in her status, prominence to this particular state, all of that combined into this particular thing is like the ultimate coup de grace, of this entire saga to conclude. Like, it's the classic story of like, if you don't die as a hero, you can live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Yeah, and probably just wanted to show her out before she's completely labeled that way. You'll also notice over the last few years, right? Zuckerberg has just been a lot more public facing. Now that could just be a direct consequence of the fact that so much shit has happened that has needed him to come to Congress and show his face so much more. But I genuinely don't remember seeing Sandberg anywhere, right? Before it used to be the two of them together. Then Zuckerberg had more face. I read this beautiful article. I think it was on the Washington Post. It's called Mark Zuckerberg Finally Learns Politics. And how he's gone through all this, how he's now starting to learn after 2016, how he started hanging out with both conservative and democratic leaders, how he started understanding what lobbying is, how he had training, all those kind of things. How Zuckerberg got political. He realized, like, hey, running this company is not just about knowing code and delegating. I need to be the face myself. And then other things also, right? So it's been long documented that Sandberg increasingly had fewer people reporting in to her. Now, I don't know whether this was her doing or whether, again, the larger, taking kingdom away thing. And also then there's a thing about the metaverse. Like I was actually quite surprised. I've been following the metaverse news quite closely, right, just to see, okay, where is this thing going and what exactly is Facebook doing? I haven't heard Sandberg speak about it at all, which almost makes me think that this could have been the tipping point. Like, okay, it's very clear that you want to go in this direction. I don't believe in that kind of vision. I want out. That could be very well be the tipping point for her to leave. Is what I think.
It may also very well have been like, that is like it happens often, on a much smaller level in a company where when you're on your notice period, right, you're handling all the older jobs and the newer jobs you're kind of kept out of the loop of, right?
No, but here's the thing. Zuckerberg, sure, he might be a sociopath and whatever, but he's not an idiot. And if there's one person who could figure out how to monetize this thing called the metaverse,
right,
I think it would be Sandberg. I think she'd have a great idea of, okay, here are the assets, here's what it means to people, etc. Here are the data points that we can sell to advertisers, here are the assets that we can create, all that. And just like we need a break from social media once in a while, we need a break here on Simblified as well. So let's take a quick little break. See you on the other side. And now back to our look at Sheryl Sandberg's career. I think Cred should look at hiring Sheryl Sandberg as a CEO to finally figure out how they can make money.
But that's what I get. And like with that whole thing about Zuckerberg kind of trying to come into his own as like the guy who can do both the jobs in his own thing, is where he must have like with this pivot. It's almost like this thing that now, okay, the first version was something that Sheryl Sandberg monetized and made wherever it went. But the second half is my baby. This is my, this is mine. And so entirely, this is a project that, I'm sure this decision or some parts of this decision were already in the works for quite a while. And so for that happening in the way that it has, I think it may have already, that may have factored into his thinking as well. I feel that might have been
very likely. I'm sure there'll be lots speculated about this over the next few months. So when you look at Sandberg's career now, right, like, so there was this period till 2016 where she was untouchable. After that, everything just seemed like, I wouldn't say tarnished necessarily, but almost like, oh, wow, you ruined that unnecessarily. Just, whatever. So it actually puts a lot of her earlier work in perspective. So the same things that they say, oh, wow, she did this, she figured out how to do this. In her golden years are now suddenly things like take data mining, for instance, right? Pre-2016, everyone like, oh, wow, they figured out how to. I like the footballer's page. Now I'm seeing football-related ads. Genius, win for everybody involved. Now suddenly post-2016, that's become data mining is dangerous and privacy and all that has started becoming a thing. Similarly, like lobbying. For what it's worth, Sandberg, I believe, or at least Facebook, for what it's worth, I think was the first big tech company, even before Google, to properly establish relationships with agencies. The middlemen. I think so. I might be mistaken on this. Google also has a tremendous engine right now, but I think Facebook did it better at a larger scale At least from what I've seen. I could be completely mistaken.
Again, this is this thing also, but what I feel is like I think they definitely identified the opportunity most profitably.
Yeah.
Right.
There we go.
So from their perspective, like identifying that, okay, I need to go to these particular middlemen. These are the people that will actually be my drivers of business.
Yeah.
And how do I leverage them for the most amount of profitability and build an entire structure that actually builds relationships on an ongoing basis with them is, I think, something that Facebook did the most. Because again, if you look at it this way, Google had a head start on them. On all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Google could have set up all of these systems well in place and like almost shut Facebook out on some levels there. But the fact that Facebook moved as quickly as it did to set up these relationships, which from whether it's partnerships with agencies, partnerships with Facebook
partnership with
creators as well. I think the way they have moved, how quickly they have moved, and how profitably they have moved is pretty unprecedented in the tech world so far.
Yeah, I think there is a lot to be. I mean, while we're reading a lot about Sandberg's legacy and all that right now, because that's all there is, unfortunately, I would love to actually like see more about, okay, what did she actually do? What was her style? Like, how did the whole agency establishment thing go about? The closest thing I could find, and for anyone who's actually interested, is Reid Hoffman did a great podcast with Sandberg a couple of years, or actually more than a couple of years back, where she talks about how she built the teams and all that, but still doesn't go into this level of detail. So that pretty much is like the career of Sandberg, definitely the most celebrated COO of big tech. Like, I am struggling to think of an other tech COO who had the same kind of brand. Like, who is Tesla CEO, for example?
Exactly.
Right?
I know.
Like, so if nothing else, right, after I haven't followed Sandberg's career or anything, but after having read up a fair bit, what I've gained a lot of respect for are COOs or people in operational roles. Like, it reminds me of the Dilbert comic that I once read. I know it's not woke to call Dilbert, but it's okay. Where that pointy head boss says something like, we want to do this, some random shit he says. Is obviously philosophical and up in the air, and then he goes and stands next to Dilbert and says, the visionary part is done, now it's your job. So I feel like CEOs are something that way, especially in the tech world, where you have this guy saying this and then Samuel, okay, now we need to make this thing work. I think the most stressful job in the world, I would not take it if I was offered a lot of money and great headphones for life, would be the COO of Tesla. Cannot imagine working in a condition like, I'm sure.
I mean, that's what, right? Like, this reminds me of. This reminds me of when in one of my previous organizations, I will not name which one, and a very senior person who I will not name, and a slightly junior person was working with that senior person, and they were working on a certain brief that had come in, and when that brief came in, this senior person, so this person's walking, the junior person's walking in the hallway, the senior person spots them and yells out to them, hey, I hear this brief has come in. Come see me sometime. I have an opinion on it. And this guy is walking with me and he turns and he mutters with me that, can you give me some slides instead of that? So instead of your opinion, I would prefer some slides there.
Would you like some slides with that?
Yeah. So I mean, that whole aspect of, I mean, I personally have been guilty of that. I mean, as strategists, as you may know, Chuck, we've put a lot of stuff on slides, which may very well not be possible to execute or will be extremely difficult. Like we end up writing a couple of words on the slides, which end up becoming someone's 4 to 5 weeks of work. Yeah. So and there is a large amount of appreciation for the people who actually make the rubber meet the road. And so that's definitely there. But
completely agreed.
In that particular thing, I was actually going through this Time article. So there's a Time article on Sheryl Sandberg that ends really, really strongly and kind of sums up all the points that Sheryl Sandberg may be giving up the title of COO, but she's not going away. She retains her seat on the Meta board. She retains legal liability, most importantly, legal liability for a role in Meta's worst failures.
Nice. Right. She retains the rights to the liabilities.
And Sandberg serves as a cautionary tale. The harm caused by Facebook and her decision not to prevent or mitigate it may be the aspect of Sheryl Sandberg's legacy that will reverberate the longest.
Wow. So it's like I mean, both the cautionary tale as well as look at this lodestar, what can happen with hard work and all that.
No, I mean, I can almost imagine that right now there are still eulogies of her legacy that are being written at this point. I can almost imagine a decade later where Sheryl Sandberg might be one of the biggest villains that are written into tech history, and along with Zuckerberg or whoever else. The fact it might be narrated that people at the time used to think of her as a hero, but now we know
as
how
a hero. See, the flip side could also happen, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot being speculated as to what Sandberg is going to do right now. She says she's going to focus on a philanthropy and all that, but I think that's just a cover till she gets to something else, or Cred hires her, or something of that. Like, what they need somebody to figure out how to make money. And it could very well be that she continues with philanthropy, or she does something that's really transformative, and history will remember her as a hero. Like, there was a point of time when Bill Gates was considered the evil big tech guy, right? At one point of time. But right now, as I think Time Magazine only put it, or somebody put it, is like he's now the big cuddly granddad Papa Bear of big tech, or something of that sort. So Sandberg has the resources, she has the connections to, she's got the smarts for sure, to make something like that happen. So that is immediately what Sandberg's legacy and what she could do. But for me, like, what happens to Meta from here? Because now it's gone back to frat boys, right? In some sense, like, they've replaced with somebody. I'm not quite sure what his operational skills. I'm sure he's a very like talented coder or whatever it is. But what happens to Meta now? I mean, it's a huge loss in brand for them somewhere, right? More than resource.
It is also, and I feel it's quite a pivotal point. Like, the one thing that I see with, I mean, Meta is legitimately at that crossroads moment right now.
Seriously, there's just so many things, right? So many things.
So many things. Because again, like, this entire move away from like trying to pivot into this whole
metaverse thing,
metaverse perspective, and also, like, the metaverse holds so much promise, but it could very well be the Google Glass of this decade.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, more than Google Glass didn't wreck the business, right? It could be something that actually, because over here, a lot of resources are actually being taken away from teams that make money and being put into this. So it could very well.
So it's a big gamble, along with like this whole, I mean, Sheryl Sandberg seems like the closing the chapter on the last decade of Facebook. The good and the bad.
I think that's a nice way to sort of sum.
So I mean, that's where now it's that crossroads moment. And I mean, the last decade and a half of Facebook has been defined by Zuckerberg's genius. Let's see if he still retains that mojo anymore.
Yeah, it almost makes, and this is the last thing that I wanted to ask, like, can CXOs especially from big tech, even be considered role models anymore? Because if you look at the lay of the land right now, it's extremely slim pickings in terms of, all right. So granted, I think Satya and Sundar are doing good jobs, but they're not forceful personalities. I don't think there are like teenage kids who are putting up posters of Satya Nadella in there, or even Tim Cook for that matter.
Why you forgot about Parag?
We'll get to Bluebird in some time, but like, all of these guys seem to be very good COOs who happen to move into CEO roles. And there's no better example of that than Tim Cook. He's increased shareholder value brilliantly. He's not a genius like Jobs was, but at the same time, he's run the company brilliantly. But again, he's not flamboyant. He's not out there. Again, I don't think that there are going to be kids who are necessarily going to be quote unquote inspired by Tim Cook, even though I'm sure he inspires a lot of people inside the company. And then all the other examples are just best stayed away from, right? The less you talk about Elon Musk, the better. The Zuckerberg, well, I'm not quite sure whether anyone would want to call him a role model. It just seems to me that big tech now has a dearth of people who could possibly be called I mean, icons for sure, but role models, like, I want my kid to be like that, I'm not quite sure. And I know I'll probably get a bit of pushback for this, but seems to me like the last.
I agree with that, because also, I mean, if I was to take a much more macro view and on this, it seems like, I mean, end stage capitalism has caught up with the role models, the role model situation there. Because again, at the end of the day, I mean, we probably saw the last of those grand old role models from the tech and the CXO space, or like capitalists who are massive role models. Because again, I think the world is pivoting to a different space where it's like there is that, I mean, either virtue or at least virtue signaling is extremely important, and it needs to pan out over a certain period of time. So which is where honestly I see in this particular landscape, even including international examples, and I know we have of course got an Indian bias, I see Tata to be the most resilient brand in that particular perspective. Yeah. Like, which is some people who have kind of like, at least to the best extent in a large scale with all these large, in the real world compliance perspective, managed both profits as well as kind of like their angle of philanthropy as well as like some level
got a
of
legacy,
value.
Right? I mean, the broad legacy is positive.
Yeah, and I mean, trust perspective, like, I mean, in this day and age where trusting a company is just filled with fallacy, they do still exist there, and that's what I feel. I mean, it's maybe a small ecosystem and it's a limited experiment kind of scenario where the Tatas can be trusted. But honestly, if you look at it overall, I think, and on some level, I think big tech has also embraced the fact that, you can't trust us, but you will need us.
Yeah, that, or there's this term, right? The professional CEO, the person who's not necessarily a showboat or anything like that, but just gets the job done. Again, the three examples I said are pretty much like that, right? Sundar, Satya, and Tim Cook, for that matter, the professional CEOs. And by that, what I mean is, if they get a better offer from somewhere else tomorrow, they might bounce. Right? I would even count Parag in that. And for some time, I was very happy about the fact that Twitter finally had stable leadership for once. Dorsey was all over the place, quite literally spending half his time in another country or company. So I was happy that, okay, finally he looks like an adult has walked into the room, right?
Finally,
And of course, we all know where that's going. But that could be another factor where they don't want to be role models. They just want to hunker down, do the work that they're supposed to do. They know a large part of the compensation is based on how the stock performs, and they won't be happy making headlines and stuff like that, which many founders might be happy to. Anyway, there's a lot of speculation that could happen. And that is, I guess that's pretty much it. I want to end with like one quote, which I saw. I read this on Quartz, website that I enjoy a fair bit, and which was speculating about whether Sandberg might move into politics. And this is such a damning statement. This is such a damning statement. Do voters want a candidate whose professional claim to fame is running one of the least trusted brands in America? And that made me like kind of sad, because I'm pretty sure she did a lot of hard work to get there, but that's the legacy that has been left behind. It's kind of damning, really. But that's pretty much about it.
That's where, I think I think it's somewhere it's a very extreme analogy, and I'm definitely not comparing Facebook or the running of Facebook to the Nazi machine.
Wow. If you have to start with that. But
there was a documentary that I was watching where there was actually a Jewish person who was spending a significant amount of time just understanding the operational details of how the Nazi Holocaust machine was working.
Sure.
Right? From an operational point of view, even that person was commenting that there's a lot of operational elegance in this.
Elegance, yeah.
Right. And there's a lot of operational efficiency and elegance in this entire engine. And that's where you actually come down to like, I mean, if you are to evaluate anything in its pure merit, there is a lot of operational elegance in a lot of stuff. But is there merit in appreciating that operational elegance there? So that's
that's a fair point. So we may appreciate Sandberg for everything that she did, but then you step back and ask, hey, was this really needed in the first place?
Again, definitively not comparing Facebook to the Nazis.
Please do not quote us out of context to the last 5 minutes. I think that's pretty much it. This is, like I said, a slightly random episode. We just wanted to, I wouldn't even say we paid tribute necessarily to, I think we actually took more of a dump on her career more than celebrated or anything, but hopefully put a little bit of context behind this name that's doing the rounds on a lot of editorials and all that of late. So that's pretty much it.
But I mean, the main thing is right now, Facebook is at a serious crossroads. So if your risk appetite is good, buy stock. If your risk appetite is bad, dump stock. So because one way or the other, it's going somewhere.
It's not going to stay flat. It's for sure. All right, fair enough. And as Naren would say, stay safe. Stay in a career that was pre-2016.
Oh man!
You know what I mean? Very clunky, but
stay operational.
Stay operational. Again, bare minimum scratch, but stay operational. Sure, and stay simplified. Bye, guys.
Bye.
See you next week where we discuss finance.